Amelia had always loved old things, vintage clothes, ancient books, and antique furniture. So when she found a quaint apartment in the city, untouched by modern renovations, she knew it was meant for her. Everything about it felt right, except for the bathroom mirror. It was strange. The apartment was old and worn, but the mirror above the sink was pristine, almost regal. Its frame, intricately carved with swirling patterns, was tarnished with age, yet it emitted a soft glow. Something about it made her uneasy, but she brushed the thought away. She was just tired from the move. On the first night, Amelia didn't think much of it. The bathroom light flickered a bit, but that was to be expected in an old building. As she brushed her teeth, she caught herself staring into the mirror. The reflection seemed normal, yet something felt off. She leaned closer, squinting at her own face. For a split second, her reflection smiled, but she wasn't smiling. Startled, she stepped back, heart pounding. When she looked again, everything was normal. She laughed nervously. It's just the exhaustion. Pulled herself, turned off the bathroom light and went to bed, the unease lingering. Days passed, and the feeling didn't go away. In fact, it grew worse. The mirror seemed delayed. Whenever Amelia would pass by, her reflection would lag just a second behind. It wasn't noticeable at first, but soon it became impossible to ignore. Her movements were no longer synced. It would turn her head, and her reflection would turn a beat later. One evening, after a particularly long day, she stood in front of the mirror again. A reflection stared back at her, but there was something wrong. She raised her hand to touch her face, but the reflection didn't mimic her. Just stood there, staring. Breath hitched. Slowly, her reflection began to smile, a wide grin that stretched unnaturally across its face. Amelia gasped, stumbling backward. She looked again. The reflection was back to normal, her face expressionless, just as it should be. But that was it. She couldn't take it anymore. Something was wrong with the mirror. She had to get rid of it. That night, Amelia couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that twisted grin. She needed answers. Grabbing her laptop, she began researching. She scrolled through articles about cursed mirrors, haunted reflections, and strange phenomena. One story caught her eye. A mirror, much like hers, was said to have belonged to a sorceress centuries ago. The tale was eerie. People who stared into the mirror for too long would find themselves trapped in it. Their souls imprisoned while their reflections lived on, feeding off their fear. Her heart raced as she read on. The mirror in the story sounded just like her. Ornate, ancient, and undeniably cursed. She had to leave. Whatever was happening, it was dangerous. She decided to pack up and move out the next morning, but as she packed, the bathroom door creaked open. Amelia froze. The air felt thick, oppressive, as if someone or something was watching her. Slowly, she turned toward the bathroom. The mirror seemed to shimmer in the dim light. Its surface almost lithe. Her reflection was there, but it wasn't alone. Dark, shadowy figures crowded behind it, their faces twisted in agony. They weren't just reflections, they were trapped souls. People who had fallen victim to the mirror's curse. Panic surged through Amelia as she realized she wasn't just seeing things. Figures behind her reflection were real, and they were watching her, waiting for her to make a move. She needed to destroy the mirror, and whatever horror was lurking inside it. Without thinking, she grabbed a heavy object from the counter and swung it at the glass. The mirror cracked, but as she went to swing again, something unexpected happened. Her reflection moved, not just mimicking her movements, but reaching out toward her. Cold, invisible fingers wrapped around her wrist, pulling her closer to the mirror. Amelia struggled, screaming as she tried to break free. The pull was too strong. The crack in the mirror widened, distorting her reflection, making it look more grotesque. Her reflection smiled again, that same horrible grin, as it yanked her through the glass. The world shifted. She felt herself falling, tumbling through darkness, her screams swallowed by the void. The next morning, the apartment was silent. Sunlight filtered through the windows, but the bathroom remained dark. The mirror stood unbroken, surface smooth, untouched. There was no sign of Amelia, but in the reflection, a faint, twisted smile appeared, waiting for the next victim to look too closely. Ryan moved into his college apartment with excitement. It wasn't fancy, but it was his first place on his own, and he couldn't wait to make it his. The apartment was small but comfortable, and for the first few weeks, everything felt normal. But then he started hearing the whispers. It began one evening after a long day of classes. Ryan was in the shower when he heard something strange. Faint whispering sound. Paused, listening, but it disappeared almost as quickly as it had come. He shrugged it off, figuring it was just the pipes or maybe his neighbor's TV. The next night, it happened again. This time, it was clearer. The sound wasn't coming from his neighbor. It was coming from the drain. Ryan leaned down, staring into the dark hole in the shower floor, trying to make sense of it. He listened carefully, heart racing. There were voices, soft and distant, but undeniably real. He stepped out of the shower quickly, his mind racing. It had to be his imagination. He'd been stressed from school, and maybe his brain was just playing tricks on him. But deep down, Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. The whispers didn't stop. Over the next week, they became louder, more insistent. Sometimes they sounded like they were right there with him, just beneath the surface of the water. They weren't just voices anymore. They were words, though distorted and hard to understand. Ryan couldn't make out much, but what he did hear chilled him to the bone. "Help us," the voices seemed to say. "We're trapped underneath." Ryan didn't know what to do. He told a few friends about it, but they laughed it off, saying it was probably just the pipes making noise. But Ryan knew better. Every time he stepped into that shower, the voices grew louder, more frantic. He tried ignoring them, tried drowning them out with music, but nothing worked. They were always there, whispering, calling to him. Then one night, the whispers changed. They weren't asking for help anymore. They were warning him. "Get out," they said. "It's coming. It's in the walls." Ryan's heart raced as he listened to the voices, his blood running cold. What was in the walls? Was it the source of the whispers? He didn't have time to think. Suddenly the pipes rattled violently, and the shower water turned ice cold. Then he heard it, scratching. It was faint at first, but then it grew louder, more frantic. Something was moving inside the walls, something that didn't belong there. Ryan bolted out of the shower, his mind racing with terror. He tried to leave the apartment, but the door wouldn't budge. The scratching grew louder, accompanied by more whispers, angry, pleading voices that filled the air around him. The walls seemed to pulse with life, pipes groaning as if under pressure. Ryan felt trapped, suffocated by the noise. Suddenly, the bathroom drain gurgled loudly, and a rush of dark water began to pour out of it. It wasn't normal water. It was thick, black, and reeked of something foul. Ryan backed away as the water spread across the floor, the voices now screaming in his ears. "It's too late," they said. "It's here." Before Ryan could react, the drain exploded open, and something emerged from it. It was dark, amorphous, and filled with writhing shadows. He screamed as the thing surged forward, wrapping around his legs, pulling him toward the drain. Clawed at the tiles, desperately trying to hold on, but the force was too strong. The last thing Ryan heard before being pulled under was the sound of the whispers, now deafening in his ears. The next morning, Ryan's apartment was quiet. Black water had vanished, and the drain was normal once again. But there was no sign of Ryan. The whispers, however, remained, waiting for the next tenant to hear their call. Sarah had always been a rational person. She didn't believe in ghosts, demons, or anything supernatural. So when she started noticing something strange in her bathroom, she tried to rationalize it. Some things defied explanation. It started with a shadow. Every night, as she stood in front of the bathroom mirror brushing her teeth, she noticed something out of the corner of her eye, a dark shape behind the shower curtain. At first, she ignored it. Her bathroom was small, and there was no room for anything to hide. It had to be a trick of the light. The shadow was always there, No matter how many times she glanced over, it remained, lurking just behind the curtain. Never moved, never made a sound. It simply stood there, watching her. One night, Sarah decided to confront it. She gathered her courage and yanked the shower curtain open, expecting to find nothing. But the shadow was gone, just as she knew it would be. The tension in her chest eased slightly, but as she turned back to the mirror, she froze. In the reflection, the shadow was still there, standing behind her, unmoving. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she spun around. The shower was empty. She checked the mirror again. The shadow was gone. She told herself it was a hallucination. She was just imagining things, but deep down, she knew something wasn't right. Over the next few nights, the shadow grew bolder. It no longer stayed in the periphery. Every time Sarah looked into the mirror, it was there, standing behind her, its dark form looming just out of reach. Sometimes, it seemed to get closer, as if it were slowly advancing toward her. The worst part was, it never showed up when she looked directly at the shower, only in the reflection. One night, in a moment of desperation, Sarah set up a camera to record the bathroom while she slept. She hoped to catch whatever was happening on tape, prove to herself that it was all in her head. But when she reviewed the footage the next morning, she felt sick. The video showed her standing in the bathroom, brushing her teeth, but she wasn't alone. The shadow was there, clearly visible behind her. But that wasn't the worst part. In the footage, Sarah was talking to it. Her lips moved silently, her eyes glazed over as she spoke to the shadow behind her. She couldn't hear what she was saying, but her face was expressionless, her voice lost to the recording. Terrified, Sarah deleted the footage. She didn't want to know what she had said. She tried to avoid the bathroom after that, but eventually she had no choice but to face it. One night, the shadow appeared again, this time closer than ever before. It was no longer standing behind the shower curtain. It was right behind her, its dark form nearly touching her in the reflection. Sarah couldn't move. She was paralyzed with fear, her breath coming in shallow gasps as she stared at the mirror. The shadow tilted its head slowly, as if acknowledging her presence for the first time. Then, without warning, it reached out, its dark hands stretching toward her. Sarah screamed and spun around, but the bathroom was empty. The next morning, Sarah packed her things and left the apartment. She couldn't stay there any longer. But as she closed the bathroom door for the final time, she caught a glimpse of the mirror out of the corner of her eye. The shadow was still there, waiting for her to return. Jake was thrilled to move into his new house. It was small but charming, with just enough space for him to live comfortably. The bathroom, however, had one strange flaw: single cracked tile in the corner. At first, Jake didn't think much of it. It was an old house after all, and small imperfections were to be expected. But no matter how many times he tried to fix the tile, it kept cracking again. And each day, the crack seemed to grow. Then came the noises. It started with a faint scratching sound, like nails scraping against the tile. Jake dismissed it as the house settling, or perhaps rodents in the walls, but the noise grew louder with each passing night. It was no longer a soft scratching. It was frantic, desperate, like something trying to claw its way out from beneath the floor. Jake tried to ignore it. The sound gnawed at him. He found himself avoiding the bathroom, crack in the tile always seeming to beckon him, daring him to investigate. One night, the scratching was so loud, it woke him up. Jake couldn't take it anymore. He grabbed a flashlight and crouched down by the cracked tile, determined to find the source of the noise. As he shined the light on the crack, something caught his eye. Dark water, thick and oily, was seeping out from beneath the tile. He recoiled in disgust, but the water continued to spread, forming a pool around the crack. Then the laughter started. It was faint at first, like the giggle of a child, but it grew louder, more sinister, echoing through the bathroom. Jake's heart pounded in his chest as he stood up, backing away from the tile. The laughter continued, accompanied by the scratching, which was now frantic, almost violent. Before Jake could react, the tile shattered. Dark, twisted hands burst from beneath the floor, their fingers long and clawed, covered in dirt and grime. They reached for him, pulling at his legs, trying to drag him down into the dark pit that had opened up beneath the tiles. Jake screamed and struggled, but the hands were too strong. They pulled him down, inch by inch, as the laughter grew deafening. The last thing Jake saw before he was swallowed by the darkness was the bathroom floor closing up behind him, cracked tile resealing itself as if nothing had ever happened. The next morning, the bathroom was spotless. The tile, once cracked, was now whole, but there was no sign of Jake. The house remained quiet, the laughter and scratching gone, but the tile still had a small, faint crack, waiting for its next victim. Mia had always loved taking long, hot showers. The steam and heat helped her unwind after long days at work, but lately her showers had become anything but relaxing. Started innocently enough. After every shower, when the mirror fogged up, Mia noticed strange patterns forming in the condensation. At first, they looked like random streaks, caused by the steam and water, but over time, the patterns became more distinct. Letters, words, as if someone was writing on the glass. First message was simple. Hello. Mia stared at the foggy mirror, heart racing. She wiped the glass clean, hoping it was just her imagination. The next day, the message returned. This time it said, "Can you see me?" Mia was unnerved, but still tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was an old message from a previous tenant, something that had been left behind and was only showing up because of the steam. But as the days passed, the messages became more frequent, more personal. "I'm watching you. Don't leave me." One night, after a particularly long day, Mia stepped out of the shower and froze. The mirror was completely fogged over, but in the center, a single clear handprint stood out. It wasn't hers. Panic surged through her. She wiped the mirror clean, but the handprint remained. And this time, there was a new message. "I'm coming." Mia felt a cold chill crawl down her spine. She stepped back from the mirror, heart pounding. Suddenly, the lights flickered and the temperature in the bathroom dropped. Mia's breath came out in visible puffs as the room grew colder and colder. Then, the mirror fogged up again, and a figure appeared in the reflection. It wasn't Mia. The figure was tall, shadowy, its face obscured by the fog. It stood directly behind her, watching her through the mirror. Mia spun around, but the bathroom was empty. She looked back at the mirror. The figure was still there, closer now, hand reaching out toward. Terrified, Mia bolted from the bathroom, slamming the door behind her. She refused to go back in for days, but eventually, she had no choice. When she did return, the messages were gone, mirror clear. For a moment, she thought it was over, but as she turned to leave, the mirror fogged up one last time. "You can't run forever." Jessica had always been a night owl, often finding solace in the quiet solitude of her small apartment. One evening, after a long day, she decided to take a relaxing bath. As she filled the tub with warm water and added her favorite lavender bubbles, she heard a faint, almost imperceptible whispering. She assumed it was just the house settling or the sound of the water running, so she dismissed it and sank into the tub. But the whispering grew louder, more distinct. It was coming from the pipes, faint yet unmistakable voice echoing through the bathroom. Jessica strained to listen, but the voice was unintelligible, a low murmur she couldn't quite make out. It was unsettling, but she tried to relax, thinking it was just a figment of her imagination. The next night, the whispering returned, more persistent this time. Jessica's curiosity got the better of her, and she placed her ear against the bathroom pipes, trying to decipher the voice. To her horror, she realized it was calling her name. The voice was desperate, pleading, with a tone that made her skin crawl. "Jessica," it whispered. "Help us. It's coming." Fearful, Jessica left the bathroom, but the voice followed her. It echoed through her apartment, growing louder and more frantic. Desperate to escape the eerie sound, she left her apartment and went for a walk, trying to clear her head. When she returned, the whispering had intensified. That night, Jessica lay awake in bed, the voice echoing in her mind. She heard the sound of scratching from the pipes, as if something was trying to break through. The whispers grew louder, more urgent, until they were screaming. In a fit of terror, she went back to the bathroom. The mirror was fogged up, and in the condensation, she saw words forming. "It's here. We're trapped." Suddenly, the water in the tub started to bubble violently, and the temperature dropped sharply. Jessica's breath fogged up as she watched in horror. The voice in the pipes grew deafening, and she felt a cold hand wrap around her ankle from the bathtub. Screaming, Jessica tore the bathroom apart, trying to find the source of the voice. As she did, she noticed the pipes were shaking violently, and the walls were cracking. The last thing she saw was the bathroom floor giving way, and she was pulled into the darkness below. The next morning, Jessica's apartment was silent. The bathroom was empty, with no sign of the terror that had unfolded. The pipes were still, and the whispering had stopped. But if you listen closely, you might hear a faint, desperate whisper coming from the pipes, calling for help. Emily moved into an old farmhouse that had been vacant for years. The house had charm, but the bathroom was particularly unsettling. It had an old wooden cabinet above the sink with a rusted lock. The cabinet had been sealed shut. Emily was curious about what might be inside. One evening, she decided to clean the bathroom and tried to open the cabinet. To her surprise, the lock came off easily, and the cabinet door creaked open. Inside, she found old toiletries and faded towels, but nothing out of the ordinary. She put everything back, locking the cabinet once more. That night, Emily heard strange noises coming from the bathroom. At first, she thought it was the house settling. The noises continued, a scraping sound, as if something was being dragged across the floor. She tried to ignore it, but the sounds grew louder, more insistent. Unable to sleep, Emily went to investigate. The bathroom was dark, but the cabinet door was ajar, slightly open. She felt a chill as she approached it, and the scraping sound grew louder. The cabinet seemed to be moving on its own, creaking and rattling. Suddenly, the door flung open, and a gust of cold air blasted Emily. The cabinet was filled with old, dusty items, but one thing caught her eye. An old, faded photograph of a woman with hollow eyes. The photo was staring directly at her, its eyes following her every move. Emily felt a cold hand on her shoulder, and she spun around, but no one was there. The bathroom light flickered, and the temperature dropped dramatically. The photograph seemed to move on its own, the woman's eyes shifting and her expression changing to one of terror. Panicked, Emily tried to close the cabinet door, but it resisted. The scraping sound intensified, and the cabinet began to shake violently. She heard whispers coming from within, pleading and begging for release. "Let us out," the voices cried. "Help us." Emily slammed the cabinet door shut and locked it tightly, hands trembling. She ran out of the bathroom, her heart racing. That night, she couldn't sleep, and the noises continued, echoing through the walls. The next morning, Emily found the cabinet door open again, photograph missing. The noises had stopped, but the cabinet felt colder than ever. She left the farmhouse soon after, unable to shake the feeling that something was still trapped inside, waiting for someone to unlock it again.